Good morning, everyone. It is the morning of June 2nd. I'm sorry I posted the link late, but thank you for the people that are currently watching. We're going to wait a couple minutes for people to show up. And then once those people show up, we can get started. Well, it looks like my overlay is a little bit off to the side. I gotta fix that. Folk 15, I don't know who you are specifically because your name's not written, but hello. I'm assuming you are a student of my class. Once again, if you can get your classmates to show up if you know they're not here, please make them do so. Hello, Yazdan. Good morning. Morning, Matthew. Will you need your textbooks today? No, you won't need your textbooks. The only thing you'll be needing your textbooks for is the homework, essentially. But other than that, not much. Because a lot of the questions are going to be practice problems that are already listed here. So it should be pretty straightforward. Today's lesson is a little bit longer than yesterday because we're trying to speed up the process. So we're doing completing the square. It's supposed to be separated into two parts, but we're just gonna grind through all of it today instead. Just gonna wait a couple more minutes and then we're good to go. Do I like Valorant? Yes, I think it's a good game. Official launch has already launched like 3 hours ago, I think. Yeah, I hit Silver 3. Was about to hit Gold 1, but then I just didn't stop playing. Okay, well, it's 11:04. Hello, Tom. So let's just get started. I don't want to wait too long. So let's just get started with this stuff here. Okay, so completing the square, we kind of reviewed this already, but I didn't realize it wasn't something exactly that you particularly learned. You learned about vertex form, standard form, and factored form, right? But I didn't realize that you didn't learn how to even get here. So that's my fault with the review session. I thought you did, and that was a misunderstanding. So let's clarify how to do completing the square today and learn about what we can do with it. So some main points, once again, some notes that I want you to write down here in case you forgot. It gives the vertex for vertex form, and I think that's very obvious, right? And so, which is h comma k. Okay. So the vertex form gives the vertex. I think that's pretty straightforward. The standard form gives the y-intercept, which would be 0 comma y. Or sorry, I keep messing up. It is morning. 0 comma c. Sorry, whatever the c value is, and then gives x-intercepts. Right, and I don't want to write the 2 here because it could be different depending on the coefficient in front of x. But we talked about this yesterday where we solve using our factored form, and so that's what we want to do as well. So these are the key points that you need to remember for this whole chapter. It's very important that you understand, when do I use vertex form, when do I use standard form, when do I use factored form, like how do I get to these forms, right? And can I convert from one to the other to find missing information? So first thing here, let's get some quick things here. Before we even change the standard form, can someone in the chat quickly type, what is the vertex for this quadratic equation here? What's the vertex? What is the vertex for this equation? Type it in chat if you know it. Give a couple seconds. All right, Maria saying -3, -4. You're very close. Very, very close. So Maria's right. The first x would be -3. So Maria's right there. But Sylvia got the y, which is -4. So the main thing you have to realize, a kind of quick way of understanding it, is that the number inside of the bracket, it's the opposite sign. Okay? So if it's +3, it's technically -3, and then the one on the outside will keep its sign. And that's how you kind of want to go for it. And the reason for that is because in vertex form, it's naturally a negative. So that h value would be -3 to get positive. So it's opposite sign for x, same sign for y. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. And now let's change it to standard form. So to change this to standard form, you're just expanding everything following BEDMAS. So you're essentially just expanding using BEDMAS. So first step is exponents. So we expand that out. If it helps, you can just write out the square by doubling the bracket. If you already know what to do and you don't want to double the bracket to save time, absolutely, you don't have to do that. Just go to expanding. So if you expand this fully, you get x squared plus 6x plus 9 minus 4. And then combining like terms, I get y equals x squared plus 6x plus 5. And then I can ask you, what's the y-intercept? Does anyone know the y-intercept here? Should be a little bit easier. What is the y-intercept? Five, exactly. The y-intercept is 5, and in coordinate form we write 0, 5. Very good. So this, as you can see, starting from vertex form, we get the vertex, we can expand it to get our y-intercept, and from here we can even factor it to get our x-intercepts, right? So very good. We have our 0, 5, 5. That's awesome. So there's our conversion. So let's get practice now with going from standard to vertex form. So completing the square, let's just quickly read this together. Completing the square, we complete the square to turn a relation form, standard form, to vertex form. Okay? So we're going from standard to vertex. So number one, we factor out the coefficient of x squared. So if it's not 1, we factor it out. We don't want it. Number two, we're going to divide the coefficient of x, which is our b value. And we're going to divide it by 2, and then we're going to square what that is. Okay? And then number three, this is what's going to be added and subtracted to create an equivalent expression. And I talked about this before, where if we add and subtract the same number, it's as if we are just adding 0, right? It doesn't count. So you're not changing anything. Yes, you are adding stuff to the equation, but you're not changing anything because you're adding a 0 by adding and subtracting. So let's go through the example here. Rewrite each of the following relations in vertex form. So I'm gonna try 2 here. Okay, I'm gonna give these 2 and show that example, and I'm gonna give you the next 2 and give you 5 minutes for that. So let's go through these 2 examples. So first off, when a equals 1, so the coefficient in front of x squared is 1. You don't need to factor anything in this case, so we skip step 1, right? Which is the common factor. So we go right into step 2, which we are going to take this part here, and we're going to divide it by 2 and square it. Now, before I do that, I usually just draw brackets to indicate that we're only going to be working with the first 2 terms here. The plus 5 is going to be kept on the outside of this bracket. So on the side here, I'm going to do some side work, and I'm going to say, well, b is 6, and so I need to solve for b divided by 2 squared. Okay? So you're taking b divided by 2 squared, which is 6 divided by 2 squared, and that's going to give me 3 squared, which is 9. So this is all side work for this question. Okay? So this is the number we're going to add and subtract. So once again, I find my b value, the number in front of the x term. I'm going to divide it by 2 and then square it. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, squared is 9. Then I'm going to add it and subtract it inside the bracket. So this is what I get with my next step. Like this. So I get x squared plus 6x plus 9 minus 9 plus 5. Okay? My next step after that is I'm going to take out the minus 9 from the bracket. Since it's a 1, I can just take it out for free without changing it. And I'm going to get plus 5 minus 9. So I'm pulling out the minus 9 from the bracket to the end here. Okay, so I've pulled that out. And now I can combine like terms as well as factor this. So this is a perfect square trinomial. And if you're able to identify that, we can factor that quickly into x plus 3 squared. And then plus 5 minus 9, combining like terms, gives me minus 4. So if you're confused or you're like, how did Mr. Choi get from here to here so quickly? All you have to do, take the middle number, divide it by 2, and that's going to give you that number there, and then you just square it. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and so x plus 3 squared. Is that always going to be true? Absolutely. If you follow the steps in completing the square that I did, then you will get the right answer that way. Final step, I ask you, can you tell me the vertex? And the vertex here is -3, -4, which is pretty obvious because this is the exact same question as the one before. So we can see here, we can get back to our original form that was given to us at the beginning. So there's your first example there. Okay. Separated into 2 parts here. So I'm going to keep that one on the screen for those still writing. I'm going to move on to the next one here, So same idea, the a value is 1. So I'm going to draw my brackets around my x terms, and I'm going to take the negative 4 on the side here. I'm going to divide it by 2 and then square it. So taking the negative 4, dividing by 2, and squaring it, that's going to give me positive 4. So negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Squaring that is positive 4. So then we can write that in our bracket by adding and subtracting it. So we're going to add 4 and subtract 4 plus 8. Okay, sorry, that should be in 2 separate sections there. Once we have that, we're going to pull out the minus 4 to the outside. So we're going to pull that out. So we get in the brackets x squared minus 4x plus 4. And on the outside, we get plus 8 minus 4. And then we can now factor and combine like terms. We get x minus 2 squared and then plus 4. And we can write our vertex at the end. Our vertex is 2, 4 in our situation here. So there's your 2 examples for these problems here. I want you to copy that down. And I want you to try the next 2 questions, complete the square, and tell me the vertex. Okay? Complete the square and tell me the vertex. I'll give you 5 minutes to complete both of these questions. I'll play some music in the background. Just mute the live stream for now until the timer's over if you don't like the music. But 5 minutes is coming on the screen, and give it a shot. Alright, you should be pretty much done now. I'm just going to write the answer first so you can check. The vertex you should have gotten for the first one, Yazdan wrote it down, is -4, -18. Okay, so if you got -4, -18 for the first one, that means you did complete the square correctly. And that is fantastic to see. Very, very good. For the second one, you should have gotten 3/2 and then 23/4. Okay. So 3/2, 23/4. And if you wrote that in decimals, that's fine. I'll take decimals for now. Okay. If you did not get these two answers, that's okay. Let's go through the work required for this. So if the vertex is -4, -18, once again, we're going to do our work here. So 8 divided by 2 squared is going to give me 16 over on the side here. And so I'm going to write x squared plus 8x plus 16 minus 16 minus 2. I pull out the minus 16. And factoring that out, I get x plus 4 squared minus 18, which gives us our answer for the first one. Now, a question I often get is, Mr. Choi, do I have to write the minus 16 in the bracket? Can I just write it on the outside? And my answer to you is yes, you have to put it in the bracket because of the example we're going to go through after. Okay, and you'll see why we keep it in the bracket first before we pull it out. The second one here. So we worked with fractions here, and the reason why that was easy to figure out is because, well, we have a -3, and dividing by that by 2 is not going to give us the nicest fraction. So just doing that quickly here, -3 divided by 2 squared, right, is going to give me 9/4. So we're now working with fractions. That shouldn't scare you in any way. So y is equal to x squared minus 3x plus 9/4 minus 9/4 plus 8. Pulling that out, we get plus 9/4 plus 8 minus 9/4. Then we have this bracket here, which we can simplify. We just take the middle number, divide it by 2. And so that's just going to be -3/2. So x minus 3/2 squared. And on the outside here, subtracting fractions. So this is 8/1. Multiply this by 4. Right? It's going to give me 32. So 32 minus 9 is going to give me 23/4. Okay. If you're not good with fractions, just use your calculator. You have those for a reason, and we're letting you use it for a reason. So please use your calculators if you have them. Okay. So there's our answer here, and that way we can get our vertex that I wrote above. So if you got those correctly or you're understanding, that's fantastic. Now we're going to go one step further and be like, hey, what if we make this a little bit more difficult? We're looking at when a is 1. What if a does not equal 1? And it's really just adding one more step. It's nothing like, oh, I'm going to die because you've added an extra step. No, that's not what we're doing here, right? It's essentially, we're just taking one extra step at the very beginning, and that's just going to cause us to do one extra step in the middle, and that's it. The process is exactly the same. You find b divided by 2, square it, add and subtract, pull it out, combine like terms, and factor. The steps are the same. So don't panic when you're saying like, oh, a is not 1. That must be significantly different. It's not. So first step, a is not 1. We need to common factor. We're adding in a common factoring element. We're going to look at these first two terms still. When you common factor, oftentimes most people will just common factor from everything. But when your goal is to change it to vertex form and you're going to be completing the square, you're only going to common factor the first two x terms. Okay, you don't need to touch the last one. So I'm only going to common factor out the 2, and that's going to give me 2 out here, x squared plus 4x, and then minus 6. So we're purposely only factoring the first two terms. Once we do that, we can say, hey, the b value is 4 instead of 8 now. So I'm gonna do 4 divided by 2 squared, which is gonna give me 4. So I know that's gonna be 4. So I'm gonna write out x squared plus 4x plus 4 minus 4 minus 6. So notice how this step is the same. The only step I've added is the 2 in front. And don't forget the 2 in front. That is important information for you for this next step that we're doing. The step after this was pulling out the minus 4 and bringing it to the outside. However, because there is a 2 in front, we also have to apply it to the 4. Okay? So when we pull the minus 4 out, we're going to go minus 4 times 2 is going to be minus 8. So as we pull it out, the minus 4 will change to a minus 8. And that's why we keep it in the bracket. We don't write it outside because there will be a situation like this where we need to multiply it before we pull it out. Then we follow the same format. Oh, whoops, not a square. So just x plus 2 squared, and then I get minus 14. And so I can write down the vertex is negative 2, negative 14. Okay? So negative 2, negative 14. Now I'm writing over into the next spot, so I'm going to skip over question 2. Let's go to question C. C, yeah. So let's go through another example here. I'm going to zoom out so you can see it better. There we go. So I'll keep the first one here if you're still copying. Second one, same idea. I do brackets here so I understand that I'm only going to be common factoring from the first two x terms. And the number I'm common factoring out is the a value, so minus 2 is going to be factored out. And that's going to give me x squared minus 4x and then minus 6. So now this time it's the opposite. So we're just doing an opposite sign. How does that change anything? It only changes the negative sign that pops out, which changes the sign inside the bracket. So now, when we do the whole minus 4 divided by 2 squared, that's still going to give us positive 4, so that doesn't really change much there. So I get y is equal to minus 2, x squared minus 4x plus 4 minus 4 minus 6. And then, continuing on, we pull out the minus 4, but we have to multiply it by minus 2. So I'm going to get x squared minus 4x plus 4 minus 6 plus 8, because negative 4 times negative 2 is positive 8. Then we can now do our final step of factoring and collecting our like term. Factoring this now gives me x minus 2 squared, and we'll get plus 2 on the outside. And you'll see, while it is a very significant difference about what the vertex is in comparison to the first question, just because we put a minus on the a coefficient. And so we have 2, 2. Okay, so I'm just going to leave this for a minute on the screen so people can continue copying it down. We're going to go through one more example for this. We're just going to go through one more example, then I'm going to give you another 5 minutes to try the next 2 questions. And then we'll take up the 2 questions and we'll move on into our next worksheet. All right. So can you type in the chat Which question do you want me to do? D, E, or F? Which one of this? Question was, why is this plus 8? The minus 4 that was on the inside, when you pull it out, you need to multiply it by negative 2. So this has to multiply to whatever you're pulling out, if that is there. So minus 4 times negative 2 is going to be positive 8. And so that's how we get positive 8 here. We have 1 vote for question E. Anyone else? I'm going to go for majority vote if you only go for question E. Okay, so E is the only vote I got, so let's go through E. So step by step, we're going to take that, we're going to divide it, we're going to take out the 1/2. And when we divide by a fraction, it technically doubles our values, right? So dividing by 2 is technically multiplying by 2. So we're going to get minus 16x inside there. To do the side work at the top here, it's just going to be minus 16 divided by 2 squared. And so when we do minus 16 divided by 2 squared, that's going to give me 64. Because 8 times 8 is 64. So once we have that down, we're going to continue on with our next step. So this step is the same, right? Adding and subtracting 64 that we found earlier. Then we're going to pull out the minus 64, and we're going to multiply the 1/2 because that's part in front of the bracket. So that's going to give me 1/2 is x squared minus 16x plus 64. Minus 7. And minus 64 times 1/2 is minus 32. Once we have the minus 32, we're going to factor that. Whoops, I keep writing x squared. It's just x minus 8 squared, then minus 39. And so my final vertex is 8, negative 39. So I would like you to try completing question D and question F, right? I'll give you 5 minutes to do so. All right, so another 5 minutes on the clock starting now, and I'll see you back in 5 minutes. All right. So you should be complete with that work. Let's go through. So going through each of the steps here, make sure I draw a line so I don't cross over. So first step, factor out. We have to factor out the 3 from the first two x terms, and then take the b value, divide it by 2 and square it. So I'm just going to do that work up here. So I get negative 2.5, or if you do fractions, you're just going to get 25 over 4, and usually fractions make it a little cleaner. Okay, so doing that is going to give me 3x squared minus 5x plus 25 over 4 minus 25 over 4 plus 5. So there we have it. We're going to take out the minus 25 over 4, multiplying it by 3. Okay. And so we get x squared minus 5x plus 25 over 4, and then plus 5, and then minus 75 over 4. Okay. So factoring that, take the middle value divided by 2, so I get x minus 5 over 2 squared. And on the outside here, since it's 4, we multiply this by 4 and then subtract, so 20 minus 75 is going to give us minus 55 over 4. Okay. And so there's my vertex. So as you get into fractions, you're going to be a little more confused and be like, wow, I really don't understand it, or I'm bad with fractions. But it really shouldn't freak you out when you start doing fractions, because as long as you're able to organize your thoughts better. Oh, sorry, I forgot a minus here. As long as you're able to organize your thoughts and correctly do the fraction multiplication, the process, once again, is the same. Okay. So let's take up this last question over here. I'm going to factor out. I'm going to speed up this process just a little bit because we're running low on time, and I do want to cover some other things before we end it. So I'm just going to speed up the process here. So factoring out negative 1 over 4 multiplies it by 4, so plus 24x. Dividing by 2 and squaring it is going to give me 144. I'm running out of space. And so I'm going to get minus 144 that comes out there. So pulling that out, I'm going to get x squared plus 24x plus 144. And then plus 2 plus, and then 144 divided by 4 gives me 36. Then we have that one. And then y equals negative 1 over 4, x plus 12 squared plus 38. So the final answer is vertex is negative 12 comma 38. And that would be the answer for F. So it's actually whole numbers for this one. Okay. So we're going to leave it with that, and we're going to move on to our next page. Okay, we got another like 10 minutes. We're going to try to go through one more concept with completing the square. So I'm going to leave that for a couple more seconds. Feel free to come back to the video and pause it in case you need to look at the notes again. Right? So let's move on. The third page on this thing was just homework questions, so try those on your own time. Okay. These ones. So now it asks us to solve. Okay. What does solving mean? Well, we found out yesterday that solving just means to find the roots. What x values makes your equation 0? And it was easier to find it using factored form, but what if you didn't have factored form? So if you have vertex form, you can definitely still do it. You're still solving for x when you do these questions. So we're going to follow through the same example here. We're going to move the minus 4 to the other side, just like we would do for regular algebra. We're going to move the minus 4 to the other side, and then we're going to square root both sides. So we're going to square root both sides, and this is going to give me two situations. I'm going to get x minus 3 is equal to plus or minus 4. Okay? That's going to give me two different answers. So on the left side, I'm actually going to write x minus 3 equals 4. On the right side, I'm going to write x minus 3 equals negative 4. You're going to get two answers because the square root of 4 could be positive 4. It's not 4, sorry. This should be 2. I am so sorry. That should be 2. So the square root of 4 gives you plus or minus 2, because 2 times 2 is 4, and negative 2 times negative 2 is also 4. So once you have that down, you can now solve for each x value. So x is going to be 5 here, and x is going to be 1. And there's our two answers. We have solved our quadratic equation. So using completing the square, you can still solve for your x-intercepts, but factored form should be able to give it to you faster. That's all. So let's try this next one here. This time we have the 18 on the other side already. So we're going to get rid of this a value by dividing by 2 first. So we're going to divide by 2 on both sides. We're going to get m plus 1 squared is equal to 9. We're going to square root both sides. And that's going to give me m plus 1 is equal to plus or minus 3. That gives us two sections or two answers. So that's going to give me m plus 1 is equal to 3, or m plus 1 is equal to negative 3. Solving those two for m is going to give me m equals 2 and m equals negative 4. And there's our two answers. So this process shouldn't be too difficult, right? You're just going through the process of, hey, do you know how to do algebra? If you don't know how to do algebra at this point in time, you need practice, and you need to go back to your algebra chapters and practice those, because we are well deep into this course for you to not know algebra. So I'm going to do one more example here. We're going to move over it and solve this. So this time we're just adding the extra step. We're going to move the minus 20. Then we're going to move the minus 4 by dividing. Now we're going to square root it. And a lot of things should be a red flag for you here. Minus 5, there's no square root for negative numbers. It doesn't exist, right? Which means if you ever square root a negative number, that means there is no solution. I'm going to write in capital letters to make it obvious, but this is no solution. No solution for any negative number. Okay? You cannot square root negative numbers. That is not possible in math for real numbers, right? For real numbers, that is not possible. So there is no solution there. Okay. So now let's go through a couple more examples here. I'm gonna do one example. You're gonna try the second one, and then we're done our class for today. Okay. So we're just gonna go through this long process of completing the square. So first, let's just get in the habit of moving things to one side. Yes, it's not required, but let's do that. So we're going to do this. We're going to complete the square here. We're going to x squared plus 6x plus 9 minus 9 plus 5 equals 0. We're going to pull out the minus 9. And that's going to give us our completing the square of x plus 3 squared minus 4 equals 0. So that's the first half of the question. It asked us to solve. So we need to find our x values. So we're going to keep going. Now we're going to move everything to the other side and solve for x. So I get x plus 3 squared is equal to 4. Square rooting both sides is going to give me a double answer situation of plus or minus 2. So I'm going to separate it into two sections here. X plus 3 is equal to 2 and x plus 3 is equal to minus 2. And then solving that, you should get minus 1 and minus 5. And so there's our full solution for this question. So you have the second question as well for you to do. I'll give you 2 minutes to try to do it. I know 2 minutes seems short, but do as much as you can within 2 minutes, and then we'll take it up.
wish I could remember it, but it's been a while since everything was okay.
Okay. So let's take it up. We want to move the 8n to the left side. So your first step should have been two n squared minus 8n plus 8 equals 0. A is no longer 1, so we need to factor out the 2. Then we divide the middle by 2 and square it. So that gives us negative 4, and then squaring that is 16. Once we have that there, we're going to pull the 16 out, making sure to multiply by the 2, because that's in front. So that's going to give me minus 32 when it pops out. And completing this factoring is going to give me n minus 4 squared minus 24. Okay. So now that we have that, we solve for n, because that's what the question wanted. So we're going to continue on solving this. We move the 24 first. We divide by 2. We square root it. And this is going to be an odd situation here. The square root of 12 is going to be a decimal. If you wrote the decimals, that's fine. You can actually just leave it as a square root. I'm okay with that, right? Because this root is going to give you a rational number that's going to be really long. So you can keep it as a square root, which would give you two answers. So n minus 4 is equal to root 12, and n minus 4 is equal to negative root 12. Wow, I'm running out of space. Sorry. Okay. And so your two n value should be root 12 plus 4, and then negative root 12 plus 4. So those would be your two answers. And if you did that on a calculator, you'll get decimal values. And those decimal values will be, let me check here. You should get 7.46 for the first one. And for the second, you should get 0.54. 0.54. Matthew, do you want to be specific on where you messed up specifically, so I can try to, or are you good? Do you understand what you may have made a mistake on? Okay, I think we're good here. So, I know that was a lot of information, that was a lot of examples and problems that you needed to solve, but it is going to be a little bit of catch-up, trying to catch up to the other classes. Tomorrow, it's only going to be a 30-minute session on YouTube. I'm going to be talking about your culminating that I'm going to be handing out tomorrow. And then it's going to be open to any questions that you have about our last two lessons for the past 2 days. So please tune in at 11. From 11 to 11:30, we're just going to talk, answer any questions, and talk about your culminating. Okay? So have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful day. Let this sink in, do the work, get the practice, and ask me questions for tomorrow. All right? So take care everyone. Have a good one. Peace out.